Guys, it's John, and I wanted to run through all of tomorrow's plays. So far, we had a bad week 1, I'd say a pretty good week 2, and then a not so good week 3. So kind of going back and forth. So I expect a good week 4. Also, as I said, just as the season goes on, we'll be able to invoke 2 of our strategies. One, just picking narratives, certain ones that just don't make sense in my opinion for that team to win. And as the season goes on, really around this time of year, week 4 is a good time. I just start fading teams that are undefeated against the spread and taking teams that are winless against the spread. And it works out really well. I've brought this up many times. If you've watched the channel before, then you know. If you go back 20, 30 years even, like the spreads always usually fizzle out between 40 and 60%. The lowest team being like low 40s on the cover and the higher teams being in the mid 60s. Same with the over-under. So that's one thing that I am incorporating, not for every single team, but there's still a handful of winless teams on the spread and a handful of undefeated teams on the spread. Same goes for over-under. So especially if you start rolling into like week 5, week 6, and that's still the case, I'll really be fading them or taking them pretty heavily. But anyway, the Jets Broncos, I like the Jets to cover. Again, 8 points. They've looked pretty good, but the Broncos coming off a pretty impressive game. No, we had them covering the Bucks because it just seemed kind of like nobody would be on them. And now I feel like, again, it's another establishment game for the Jets. Make them come out. That way when they play the Bills, it'll actually be like 2 powerhouses actually meeting up early beginning of the year. I went into on the AFC side. The Jets really made the most sense of any team to just kind of come out of nowhere and be maybe even a powerhouse. If not a powerhouse, just a solid team. So I think just like we saw the last week or 2 weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago, I think we got the Jets cover every time this year. But when they played, it was the Titans or something a couple weeks ago. We got them on the Patriots last week, and I think the week before they covered the Titans. But yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty one-sided game here. So I like the Jets for the cover here, -8. On the Packers, I like 2. They haven't gone over much, them or the Vikings. So I like the over 44.5. I think more of the public will be on the under. And for the game, I love the Vikings here. I love the Packers to cover the Vikings here. And it's just because, again, I went into this multiple times this year. I think the NFC North is going to be a race. Like, it's going to be very close between the Bears, Packers, Vikings, maybe even the Lions. Just to give Caleb and Love, and Caleb and, in this case, I will see how Dalton does, but Caleb and Goff, some pretty good matchups. So I think not only does the game go over, but I do like the Packers here to cover the 3. I just don't think I think the Vikings are going to miss the playoffs, even 3-0. I don't think they're going to do much. I think they're going to lose a lot of division games, and to me, a Bears or Packers makes more sense to make the playoffs than the Vikings, but you know how I feel about the Bears this year just because of Caleb. Saints Falcons is like one of those close ones, and it's another one I like the over on because, again, both teams suck on the over. I think the Falcons haven't gone over once this year. So I do like the over here, over 40.5. And I also do like the Falcons to cover the Saints. I think more people will be on the Saints. They've looked a little better in my opinion. So Saints plus 125 probably looks appealing for a lot of people. And again, I think they're going to keep some of these divisions pretty close. You know, the Falcons bring in Kirk, you got Robinson. I don't think they're going to have the Falcons start off 1-3, then they could possibly go to 1-4, basically be out of it. I think they're going to keep a lot of these teams pretty close. Next, we got Eagles Bucks, and I actually think the Bucks are going to just win, especially because of last week. So they beat the Lions, looked really good, and then they looked terrible last week. The Eagles, as long as they're the Eagles and they're looking all right and winning games, I feel like people will be on them, especially in a 50-50 spread here. I think some support for the Bucks is growing, but I still think more people are going to take the Eagles. So I like the Bucks here. Bengals Panthers is another interesting one. I like the Panthers to cover. Same reason I liked them to cover last week because there's no Bryce. And I think they're going to punish Bryce. I imagine this would be a win no cover for Cincy, something like 24-20, something of the where Bengals win the game, but they probably screw the public on the cover. But yeah, I think the Panthers are going to make the cover here. It also looks kind of light, only 5 points, and I think they look okay with Bryce on the bench, so they can sit there and call him a bust because that's what they want to do. Jags Texans on this one. I like the Texans for the cover, just because I really think that the Jags with Lawrence, I don't think they're going to continue, especially moving to London. They would have, I think, been making them look like a force, but ever since they made that announcement, like midway through last year, they've been terrible. So I wonder if they almost go through like a rebuilding period, get somebody that they know can draw, and maybe Trevor's just not the guy, but yeah, 5.5 again, and it's kind of heavy. Even though they're playing well, Jags not playing so well. Usually divisional matchups like this, with two teams that typically play pretty good on paper, you're looking at like a 3 to 4 point spread for the home team. So 5.5 is kind of high. So I like the Texans for this cover, and I also like for this one, and I keep going against them, but I do like the Colts to beat the Steelers. I don't see anybody on the Colts here. It doesn't make sense to me. They just eked by the Bears, so nothing impressive there. And Steelers have looked good, so they made the playoffs last year. I just feel like, and I felt like this for a few weeks, and I've been wrong, but I do think the Steelers finally get their first loss, keep the Colts in things, and they can also start teasing if maybe Russ comes in, even though Fields is playing good. Rams, Bears, I love the Bears to cover here. Same reason I like the Packers to win. They're going to keep that division close. Rams, on the other hand, they could have a terrible year, and nobody would miss it, especially with the Chargers. You have other teams in California now that can draw, and they're going to be getting most of the narratives. So yeah, I think the Bears win. You could have a close win where they don't cover, but I think it might be Caleb's first, really good game, where he actually looks, or I'll even say good game, because he really hasn't had a good game yet. When you can't get over one touchdown, basically, and the rest is field goals or defensive touchdowns, it's hard to say he's had a good game, but I think this will be his first, because they're showing him progressing each week, and it'll probably set it up so when he plays the Vikings or whoever he plays first in the division, it'll wind up being a pretty good game, in my opinion. It'll probably be a primetime game. So I got the Bears here covering 3. And then Commanders Cardinals is an interesting one. I would imagine way more people would be on the Commanders because, again, you're getting plus 155 for a team that is playing better right now. But I like them to win anyway. A lot of times you look at these games and there's not going to be a lot of money on these two teams. So even if it's a liability, even if it's 80% on the Commanders, if you incorporate all the other games where there's going to be way more money on, Vegas can have either team win. You see it all the time. So I kind of look for casualty games where Vegas isn't going to care that much, paying out one way or another. And the Cardinals are getting weird lines, but it doesn't really add up. Like they got a weird line against the Rams. I thought it was a trap. Rams beat them. And then the same thing happened against the Lions. They were like a 3-point dog when they should have been, I thought, bigger than that. And the Lions beat them pretty handedly. So I'm not looking too much at lines when it comes to the Cardinals. I think the Commanders win so they can continue the Daniel story. That's just my opinion. And here I'm going to take the 49ers to cover the 10. It's a lot to cover, and they're coming off a loss. Obviously, the Patriots are garbage, but whenever I see like a double-digit spread, I really look at, is the public going to want to take any team, minus that many points? And I think more often than not, they don't. They'll either stay away from it, or maybe try and get maybe like a Patriots upset, if anything, for value. But I don't think minus 10 is too appealing for people, so I'll take the Niners to cover the 10 here. Browns, Raiders, here's another one. Raiders have not looked great this year, but I do think they want to push that they're a more cohesive unit. And the Browns, I think they've looked better, even though they're 1-2. I think they've looked better. They're coming off a playoff year. They have most of the same guys, obviously some changes at quarterback, things like that. But just based off of what I'm seeing, I think I'm basically a pick 'em. Way more people here are going to be on the Browns. So I do like the Raiders here for the cover. the win in this case because they're giving up 2.5. You could take them 2.5. Honestly, it would be one of those games where it definitely could be. But I'm just gonna take the Raiders to win this game outright. Again, just right around even odds, getting some plus odds here. Chiefs Chargers. This one might surprise people. I like the Chiefs to cover here, and it's because it's 7 points. If it was like 4 points where it belongs, then I'd go with the Chargers. Chiefs probably win, but they keep it close so you can have the Harbaugh narrative. But 7 points is kind of heavy. Like, I feel like everybody's going to be on either the Chargers upset or just the Chargers covering, they get +7. So I have a feeling they might hang early, have some offensive moments, but there's going to be just a couple plays here and there, and I think the Chiefs wind up covering this 7 points. And then in their game 2 in Arrowhead, we might see a much different story. A lot of people expect Chargers win at home, then Chiefs win at home. I think the Chiefs have a pretty big record against the Chargers, like streak going, if I'm not mistaken. But I think the Arrowhead game is going to be the one. By then they can say, oh, this offense has some chemistry now. They're looking a lot different than they did in Week 4, all that stuff that they always point out. So, yeah, I like the Chiefs to cover the 7. I don't see many people on that. And finally, we got Bills-Ravens. And this one, here's another interesting one, because I wonder if the Ravens dropped the 1-3 for a story, but they kind of got that going on with the Bengals already. So I actually like the Ravens to cover the Bills here. They're active favorites, which gives a little bit away. The Bills are considered right now the best team in football, with the best quarterback in football, if you look at like the MVP races, all that stuff. And I think the Ravens getting to 2-2, Bills dropping to 3-1. Chiefs are probably going to stay undefeated, so they don't like having too many undefeated teams. I think it makes it where, again, there's a lot more open in the AFC, so these matchups will make some sense going down the road. I noticed we're doing the 2 Monday Night Football game thing. I missed last week's, but I'll hit these ones tomorrow. These Monday Night Football games. Already, Titans looks a little weird, but the Dolphins are falling apart too. So that one's really a coin flip. I'll have to look at the rosters and the handle. And then Seahawks Lions. I think the Lions again, even though they have a worse record, 3.5 just seems a little light at home. So we'll be looking into that. But yeah, pretty sure the Chiefs are gonna get this cover here. It really jumped out to me when I saw 7 points. Usually that's reserved if they're playing like the Raiders or something. So I found that interesting. And yeah, I think Caleb's got to win, make them 2-2. Packers win, so they'll all be 3-1. So then when one plays the other, it'll be 3-1 versus 2-2. And you kind of see where I'm going with that. And then a few of these, again, they're based off of spreads only. Like Vikings are undefeated against the spread right now, I believe. There's some teams that are winless against the spread. Teams that haven't gone over or under yet, stuff like that. So I always look into those type of things because it always balances out. If you look at the last however long you want to go back, it's pretty crazy how the over-unders balance out as well as spread covers. So yeah, that's what I got for tomorrow. I think it'll be a good day, especially if trends mean anything. And a couple of these games look like they should be quite entertaining. So take care and happy earnings.